Welcome to the Love Your Life and Yourself podcast, the weekly show where science meets soul and mom chaos meets mind mastery. You're not just a mom. You're a woman with dreams, a career, a body that needs care, and a soul that craves more. This podcast is your permission slip to stop surviving and start thriving in motherhood, health, career, and stress resilience. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Rath, and every week we bring you actionable insights and transformative conversations to help you create a life you truly love. From evidence-based wellness strategies to authentic self-discovery, we'll explore what it takes to thrive through expert interviews and real unfiltered stories. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back. What if the most trusted medicine in America, the one nearly every cabinet holds, has quietly become a much bigger question mark? So today, Tylenol is all over the headlines, lawsuits, presidential warnings, new studies, feeling anxiety, and possibly its relationship to autism. So what we're going to do today is unpack it all. I am not here to give you some easy answers. And really, I want to unravel this puzzle piece by piece with curiosity. So, is Tylenol the villain, specifically when it relates to autism? Or is it simply just a clue in a very complicated story about modern childhood stress, toxins, and the way we live? So, as I'm recording this just recently, September 2025, President Trump called for caution along with RFK, saying, urging moms to, quote, tough it out and to use Tylenol sparingly because of its causation of Tylenol. The headlines definitely pushed back. They weren't a fan of this, especially medical experts and in organizations like the WHO, Autism Science, the medical community, saying that the science is really far from settled. And so today, what I'm going to do is unpack it. We're going to look at, is it actually the cause? Could it be a piece of the puzzle? And what does causation versus correlation really mean? So the data shows that there was a meta-analysis and cohort studies that found a correlation. Now, correlation and causation are very different. Correlation could mean that this is a piece of the puzzle. This is a piece of the bigger picture. Causation is X leads to Y, right? And there isn't necessarily proof between prenatal acetaminophen exposure and causation of autism at this point. However, there are risks shown that exposure can possibly create a higher risk for autism and ADHD. See the difference? Correlation versus causation. There was a study in 2018 that flagged concern. This is from the 2021 European Journal of Epidemiology. A paper found a 19% higher risk for autism and 21% for ADHD among children exposed to Tylenol in utero. And also, the FDA responded by initiating a label change for Tylenol or acetaminophen products, warning of a possible association, but emphasizing that causation remains unproven. So, this is really interesting to me. I think this is fascinating. And honestly, it's not necessarily new news to me. I have seen these research studies before, but now it's in the headlines. Now our president is talking about it. RFK is talking about it. And I think, now I'm not here to tell you to take Tylenol or not to take Tylenol. From a personal standpoint, I would say, hey, less is definitely better from a toxic exposure standpoint. But let's back it way up. Let's start way at the beginning. So let's start, from a conception standpoint or even preconception when it comes to epigenetics. So our kids today, we know for certain they are more unhealthy than they were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. The rise of ADHD is astronomical. The rise of autism is astronomical. We are now seeing the projected rate of 1 in 6 kids will have autism within the next 10 years. This is wild to me, absolutely wild. So, what is it? Is it Tylenol? I think Tylenol may play a piece, but let's start back up. How is the stress of our adults increasing? Super high, right? So, stress, when we look at our children, is starting even months before conception, and it continues through pregnancy. Now, there's a direct proven shape of the fetal brain development through multiple interconnected biological pathways. This includes epigenetics, what we call the HPA axis programming, placenta function, and inflammation. So, when it comes to the health of our kids, we actually have to look at the health of sperm and egg, right? Because that's where they're getting their genetics, that's where they're getting their map of who they are. So when parents experience chronic stress before conception, research shows there are epigenetic modifications that can occur in both the egg and the sperm. This will have a direct neurodevelopmental impact on genes within the embryo. If this stress continues during pregnancy, persistent stress in mother, this disrupts that HPA axis. So the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is the core system that manages the body's stress hormones. As the dysregulation increases, what happens is the baby is essentially going to feel it. This will cross that placenta into the fetus. So if the placenta function is impaired, the stress will alter the blood flow, decrease essentially the placenta's ability to buffer the toxins. And these happen, it's going to affect DNA methylation, histone modification, brain tissue, and really how the body can respond to overall stress, both toxic stress, mental, emotional stress, and physical stress. There's neurotransmitters that shift. So this is the development of essentially the happy hormones like dopamine, serotonin within the fetus as well. So we're seeing that the stress from mom is directly linked to how the baby, the fetus, is developing. This can absolutely have an effect on how that child eventually controls emotion. What is their social emotional behavior? How are they physiologically impacted by the stress? And what that dysregulation from mom and dad has an effect way before this baby even enters the world. So now we add on all sorts of pregnancy stress from a mental emotional standpoint, even prior to conception. And now the sperm and the egg are stressed. So they combine. Now we have a stressed environment where mom lives. And now we add the day to day stressors of mom, highly processed food, chemicals, heavy metals, food packaging, refined sugars, artificial colors, preservatives, high fat, low nutritional value foods, skincare toxins, heavy metal, lead, etc. So these exposures do not operate in isolation from mom to baby. There was actually a study that showed they did a study that looked at the umbilical cord toxins, and there were over 200 toxins in these umbilical cords of brand new babies. And so you think about the toxic load that these children are exposed to in a day to day environment just from living in the world that we live in. This modern landscape of toxins everywhere, including in our food, in our environment, in our air, in our mental emotional state. This is having a drastic impact on our babies. And so when our mom is stressed, when our dad is stressed, and now our babies are stressed, how much are we able to actually adapt to the day to day stressors? We're not. It starts to really affect how we handle these. And then what happens? So not only do we have these chemical, emotional, physical stressors, now we add even more physical stressors. The birth process itself has changed dramatically over the years. Talk to your mom and dad if you're, you know, in your 30s or 40s right now. How did they have babies? Most of them had them without interventions. Now, there's a time and a place for a C-section and interventions. I had one with my first. There's no judgment there. But why are 30% of our births done via C-section? These rates have absolutely soared. Forceps, episiotomies, early cord clamping. We're now seeing how these birth effects can have an effect on the mental emotional stress. Remember, stress from early conception or preconception, during pregnancy, and now we add birth trauma, which is considered, quote, normal these days, but we really don't talk about what it does to these babies' nervous systems. There's a study done that looked at what we call a subluxation which is essentially shifts or like a misalignment of the spine that essentially will put stress and tension on the nervous system. And over 90% of these babies had subluxations from birth. And these are like normal natural deliveries too. These aren't just all C-sections. So we're seeing just birth itself is fairly traumatic. And any woman who has had a baby vaginally can tell you that. It's especially unmedicated. It's not all that pleasant. Normally, there's a lot of pressure, not a lot of room for extra space. And so a normal, healthy, natural birth can even cause some stress on a baby. But now you add all these other interventions like C-sections and forceps and inductions and balloons and Pitocin. You add all these extra stressors. And again, it's this snowball getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I get it. Don't get your panties in a wad. Sometimes these are life-saving. Again, I had a C-section myself with my first. He was breech and he was not coming out that way. And so I get it. They are life-saving and necessary at a point, but not 30% of births. Absolutely not. And then guess what happens right after birth? We have this vaccine schedule that has never actually been studied for safety for the full amount. Yeah, some of you are getting real mad now. But let's talk about this. They've done studies individually, but never the actual schedule. When I was born in the 80s, we got about 7 vaccines with a total of roughly like 10 to 12 injections by the age of 6. Now, our 2025 schedule has over 15 distinct vaccines and over 50 doses. This is 5 times more than what I got in the 80s. There's never been a study to show the safety of all of these vaccines put together on one schedule. So now we have preconception, conception, stress, pregnancy stress, labor and delivery stress. And now, right at birth, we have another added stress. And regardless of what you think about vaccines, whether you do them or not, that is totally up to you, and there's no judgment, absolutely, whatever you decide. It's still a stressor to the immune system. We want it to be. That's how they work, right? We have to ignite the immune system to get the vaccines to do their job or how they were intended to do their job. And so these early ages right at birth, the Hep B dose is given to almost all infants. Now we add another stress. And then in a couple of months, there's even more. And you add a combination. Think of like real life scenarios where, I'm not going to be exposed to 4 different, like, let's take the DTaP. Diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, dip. I can't even think of the other one right now off the top of my head. I'm drawing blank. Or MMR. We're never going to be exposed to, in real life, if we were to take this real life, I shouldn't say never. It would be highly unlikely for us to be exposed to all 4 of these at one time. They're given like that because of convenience. So then you can have them in just one shot. So I get where the medical community is coming from this, but how overwhelming to our system is that? Very. Now, again, I am not pointing my finger. Again, don't get your panties in a wad. You can't pick and choose everything I'm talking about, from maternal stress to epigenetic stress to labor and delivery stress to vaccine stress. Or now, let's talk about antibiotics and gut microbiome. So again, to me, we have to think of correlation, not causation. So now baby gets sick. Antibiotics are frequently used around the time of birth. A lot of times they start right at birth for group B strep or C-sections or possible, neonatal infection or infection of the uterus for mom, and then mom is nursing. So most of the time we are exposed to some form of antibiotics in our first years of life. Stress, right? Another added stress. Our snowball is getting bigger and bigger. So even though, again, this practice is life-saving, and by all means, I am not against antibiotic. I'm against overuse of antibiotics. Again, this has been life-saving for my family. My middle child spent 5 days in the hospital and 6 weeks on antibiotics. 6 weeks. He, uh, I believe, was 3 at the time, and he stopped walking. We ended up spending 5 nights at Children's Hospital, and he had a bone infection, which protocol is long range antibiotic use. Very stressful. Very stressful. I think I still have a little bit of PTSD from that, because now every time his leg hurts or his arm hurts, I'm like, oh my God, another bone infection. Very, very rare. Now, that saved his life. I have nothing against antibiotic use, but when antibiotics are given for every single discomfort or fever or little redness of the ear when a baby is teething, that's overuse. When most ear infections, 90% of them are viral, they'll go away on their own. See, the thing is, antibiotics disrupt the microbiome in our gut, especially those broad spectrum ones and multiple doses. Did my son have massive stressors from this antibiotics? Yes. He had a massive stressor from the infection too. My pros and cons were, yeah, we're going to take the antibiotics for 6 weeks, and then we'll figure out how to heal the gut from a stress standpoint. So I get this push and pull of like, well, should I or shouldn't I? Well, it depends. But we have to think of this as a big picture thing, especially when it comes to autism. I don't think one thing is causing it. It's this accumulation of all these stressors, starting with mom and dad, that are causing it. It continues. So the research studies show that from an antibiotic use, that antibiotic-driven microbiome disruption can alter this gut-brain signaling, causing inflammation and even brain development. So what we're seeing is the gut has a direct impact on the brain, and the brain has a gut impact on the gut. So now if we disrupt this and the gut is super healthy from either eating crappy, toxic loads, parasites, molds, heavy metals, or antibiotic use, now we have a double whammy. Now our brain is getting even stressed from our gut. And our brain is telling our gut, hey, what the heck is going on down there? Plus, we had all this crazy, terrible food, and then we give our moms folic acid. Deliberately fortified foods, especially in cereals and grains. This synthetic form of folic acid blocks the natural folate transport. I know, we were always told, take folic acid while you're pregnant, right? But this synthetic form impacts the natural healthy folate methylation that needs to happen for all these other systems to work, which impacts massively their neurodevelopment. So there's new research emerging to question whether these synthetic nutrients may actually be causing their genetics to misfire. So the complete opposite of what we're wanting. The other thing is when we talk about especially our adult population, we have a massive influx of fatty liver syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver syndrome. 32% of Americans have problems detoxifying. 32%, which is driven by metabolic dysfunction, meaning they are eating, it's essentially a metabolic dysfunction. Their insulin is dysregulated. In the United States, it's actually close to 40%. Worldwide, it's 32%. But fatty liver impairs the function of our liver. It reduces the ability for it to detoxify. How is it caused? Well, It's caused by us constantly being in this stress state. Our HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal gland, being dysregulated. That dysregulation will throw our insulin. So cortisol and insulin will act a lot like each other. It'll shuttle glucose around. And our diet, quite frankly, sucks. We eat very high carb, low protein, very terrible nutrient dense foods. And it completely throws our stress response off and our insulin off of this chart. So what do we all have here? We have stress from an adult standpoint. Those two stressors, sperm and egg, join. Now we have a stressful pregnancy. Now we have a stressful labor and delivery. Now we have all this toxic load from antibiotics and vaccines and just toxic environment and food. And then the mental emotional stress that mom and dad have. Well, we absolutely pick up on that as a child. And now we add your basic Tylenol use during pregnancy. So these are just added things for pain and discomfort, or Tylenol use for ear infection or fever. It starts to become a perfect storm. These nutritional deficiencies, physical stressors, mentally emotional stressors, toxic stressors, your body just decreases its ability to even function. We live in too stressed, overwhelmed systems. So here's my core belief. I don't think autism is the result of one single hit. I don't think that there is one thing causing it. I think this is a puzzle with multiple pieces, and we exposed a couple of them today. But if we can start reducing one puzzle slightly, that massive snowball that we have today in our extremely unhealthy world will start to get a little bit smaller. Our winter huge snowball, the spring will come and that snowball will start shrinking. That's what we need. That's what we need to actually get healthier. Our systems, from an adult standpoint, are extremely overstressed and unhealthy. This Tylenol, this piece of the puzzle is that. It's a piece, in my opinion. Our tiny little nervous systems of these babies are getting so overwhelmed and they can't handle it. It's a dysregulation of their nervous system. To me, it's a multi-hit model, a perfect storm where essentially resilience falls below that threshold. And really, it's leaving brains that are unable to adapt. So the next time you start to point a finger at one single thing, and I hope you don't get that here. I hope you don't just take one of the things and say, hey, Ashley did this or Ashley said that. This is a whole piece. I want you to start to get curious. Think about how all these little stressors over the day, days, years, can start to create this big problem. Tylenol every day should be a red flag. Not because it's the single cause, but because it points to a bigger reality. We're just trying to mask a symptom. We're not actually getting down to the root cause. Tylenol is there to, do multiple things, but pain relief typically, or fever reduction. We can have a whole nother conversation about fevers. So we're living in this very new complex world where our systems are just chronically overtaxed. And the challenge is not necessarily ahead to blame, but is start to understand and, even more importantly, act. I invite every single listener to weigh these questions and bring curiosity about how can I start reducing the amount of stress that I am exposed to? Is it looking at my medicine cabinet? Is it looking at the vaccine schedule? Is it looking at my self-care products? Is it looking at my laundry detergent? Is it looking at, I'm pregnant now, what kind of birth do I want? Maybe it's starting to sleep more so I can manage stress better. Maybe it's prayer or meditation. Maybe it's saying no more. so we can reduce our schedules a bit. Maybe it's exchanging our expectations for appreciation because we put too much on our schedules. Maybe it's getting our kids outside and less in front of a screen so their brain can actually calm and regulate more. Maybe it's them running laps around the house instead of watching their screens. I think it's all of the above. I think we can't point our finger at one thing. I don't feel like there's one thing. Now, this is my opinion. I'd love to hear your feedback on what you think. But if you love this and you think this landed well, share it with a friend. This is my mission to get our communities and world healthier. And if you agree, hit the share button, hit the like button, leave us a review. Love to hear your feedback. Thanks for tuning in to Love Your Life and Yourself. I hope today's episode gave you one more tool or one more truth to help you thrive in your health, happiness, and resilience. Remember, loving yourself isn't selfish, it's leadership. And it's the foundation for building a life that actually feels like yours. If this spoke to you, hit that follow button, leave a review, and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. And if you want to dive even deeper, grab a copy of my #1 best-selling book, Love Your Life and Yourself. It's the heart behind this podcast, and it's helped thousands of women step into a life they actually love. You can find it at drashleyrath.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care of you and keep choosing to love your life and yourself.